everybody, this is Jerrod from the SDC podcast. Thank you for visiting and watching this video. This is our first official episode. The previous episode we're calling our introduction, but this episode is our first official. We hope that you enjoy. This was filmed live on Facebook, and we just want to make sure that you know that there's some questions, some things about who's commenting. We will be doing more Facebook Lives, so please come and check those out. Just keep an eye out. They'll be fairly random, but we're going to keep trying to do this every other week. So thank you for watching, and thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next live. Thanks.
Good. All right. Thank you once again for joining us with Surviving Danger Close, SDC. We're coming to you tonight from the home of our co-host, Dusty, and of course, Jerrod's behind the camera working his magic. We would like to thank Warriors Hope for sponsoring this project that we've kind of taken on and wanted to run with, and we provide hopefully a service to all of our first responders and veterans in the area. So tonight, I want to turn this over to Dusty and see how we go.
All right. Why? Just because I got the paper? You
Yes.
think I know what I'm doing?
Perfect.
This was just copy and paste. We had to post on, I think you put it on this week, about 10 things veterans want you to know. And earlier, what really started the SDC trail journey was something similar to what you had posted. It's like, and there's things on this list that said if your therapist doesn't fix you, your therapist is there to help you fix yourself. If you absolutely need to do what's best for you, that'll make somebody upset. It's a family show. And so that got me thinking to what we're talking about today is addicted to the call. For veterans, addicted to the call would also be considered addicted to battle. And I know that, I'd be lying if I say I didn't miss that part of it.
Right.
And for first responders, it's, that next call, okay, I'm in it, I'll share just something that happened today that I text you about. Driving to work, I look up, 2 trees fall down. Right in front of me. Never seen that happen before. Missed me by a little bit, so we're all okay there. But all of a sudden, it was like I went into that. We talked about different brains.
Sure.
I went into
different modes.
That mode of here's an object in the way, adapt, overcome, get things going back to normal. Jumped out, grabbed the chain, pulled it off, got traffic going, and as I drove away from there, and after getting it all called in so somebody could come and take care of it, but as I was driving away, it was like, wow, that actually felt good.
Right? Isn't it funny how something so small can trigger that feeling?
For me, it was just 2 trees. Once you talk to somebody else, you're like, well, that could have killed you. Well, okay, there's a lot that could have killed me, but that doesn't hit your brain set. It was just that was the mission, that was the goal, and you completed it. And even something as small as that, for that moment, I felt like I had a purpose. And that's not to say that I don't have a purpose being a dad, with work, with being a son, a brother. But for that moment, I knew what my purpose was. Clear.
Mm-hmm.
This is the objective. Get it done. And it's not so much that we're addicted to the call or addicted to battle, but we're addicted to the adrenaline.
Yes, very much so.
And, I'll hand it back off to you as to how does that work for first responders? Because your adrenaline is every day for, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. For soldiers, or for veterans, it's we're over, we come back.
Sure.
The adrenaline's, it's there, but it's not as prevalent.
And one of the things is that adrenaline rush. It feels good. It cycles those chemicals in your body. It's and that's often one of the things I try and focus on when I'm doing a debriefing or a one-on-one after a traumatic incident is I try and educate people about the physiological effect of a stressor. Your body produces certain chemicals and hormones, adrenaline obviously being one of them, and to some people that feels good. It's like it's an endorphin that just it provides pleasure to you, and sometimes when you get out or retire, that's what's missing in our lives.
And it's almost like it is an actual addiction.
Absolutely.
It's the only way. Oh, how do I describe this? It's the only way that you can have an addiction without taking something externally.
Yes. I would agree.
Or
with
one
that.
of the few, maybe not the only way. Somebody with more degrees than me may correct me on that one, but you have this addiction of, oh, this feels great, and you have this high that you can live off for the rest of the day, the rest of the moment.
And I think that's why a lot of people get into motorcycle riding. There's that edge of, this feels good, because especially with the now rescinded helmet law, you can ride without a helmet. There's nobody, you can live that rebel life, if you will, and there's an adrenaline attached to
The
that.
legal rebel life.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure I got that.
You're right. Your knees in the breeze, no helmet, and you're living life. And again, those endorphins, that adrenaline chemical that your body produces, fulfills that need. For those that are in first responder backgrounds, on my behalf, like I said, I won't name my department's name, but like my fire department, we it's been weeks since we've had a call, and there is an adrenaline when you hear your tone drop for your department. And you're just like, whoo, here we go. And then, when you hear a, fully engulfed structure, or, you're like, whoo, yeah, you drive a little faster, you get a little bit more excited. But when you hear like a ditch on fire, you're just like, oh, all right, I'll get there,
Somebody get the garden hose.
Right, kind of. So there are many different things, for me personally, it's like the full arrest calls. I mentioned before, I go to those because you see the potential for good.
Right.
You like you said, you have a purpose. My purpose is to bring that guy back or that woman, right? And I'm going to do it with a team of, friends. That's our joint mission. And we all work together.
Because we're in a small community, you see the same people day after day on those calls.
Yeah, absolutely. Without going into detail, this morning I had a call right out of the gate, 6 o'clock this morning, and my boy Kevin rolls up, and it's like, hey, what's up? We totally forget. I don't want to say we forget about the call, but it's like, it's like, hey, man, it's good to see you. Like you have this respect for one another and this joy to see one another, to be involved in, really, not to sound corny, but really an intimate
absolutely
position.
That's how it is with veterans too. You've been deployed, I've been deployed. Veterans, we see another veteran, and I've seen it time and time again working with Warriors Hope, that these veterans have been deployed. These ones, maybe they're deployed to Kuwait,
right.
Or they, nothing against Kuwait deployments.
In all fairness, Kuwait was the worst one I ever been to. It was horrible living conditions.
Oh yeah, it is terrible, especially if you're only there for 2 weeks in training.
Well,
but were you there before it?
I won't talk about the Army base we went to. I believe it was Jon, the headquarters.
Oh, never went to that one.
Oh, it was amazing. They actually had ice cream. Like
what?
See, this is what I wanted to talk
All
about.
right, they lied to me.
Right.
That recruiter lied. Are you shocked?
No. We used to go to Jon just to use their pool. Everybody jokes about Air Forces, and the Chair Force and the goodies that we have, but we had a pool.
Nice,
but it was empty. So it was like you walked by it and you're like, you're ready to take a header off a 10-foot diving board.
There's the false hope that the Army does give you at times.
Yes. And then we go to Jon, and they actually had like in the food court, right? We didn't really have one of those, but at Jon, the Army, they had like a KFC. They had an Applebee's.
No way.
An Applebee's. Yeah.
Yeah, I missed that one.
Right. And they had this little patch of grass, and you don't walk on the grass.
Oh, there's probably a sergeant major standing around.
Well, there was a sign on it too.
Oh yeah.
But we all joke around about that, but it was just a little sense of home that there wasn't a soldier or an airman or a Marine that walked by that didn't pet it.
Oh.
You're in a sandbox and here's this patch of American grass. You're like,
Yeah.
that's mine. I'm touching it. They actually had a soccer field there, but it was turf. So it was just crazy to see the difference between big money Army and then the Air Force.
Now I know where the big money went.
Right. Well, that's all what we said too.
We were
Yes.
zip tying our optics on sometimes.
So anyway.
But yeah,
Back
I
on
don't know how
course.
we got on that, but
Right, so you answer the call. So you're addicted to the call.
Yeah.
How?
See, Jerrod's earning his money.
Right.
that's why he's here. We might pay him double.
Well, and he's a good actor.
Yeah, times 0. Okay. But has there ever been a moment where, I won't share your stories without you wanting to, but we talked about one that you had this week through Messenger. But has there ever been one that it's like you get there and you think, okay, I feel alive?
Oh, absolutely. It's so weird. It's hard to explain this to someone, to our spouses. All right. Because you're not dual military, right?
Nope.
All right. So it's hard to explain even to someone like Jerrod behind the camera.
Well, I was about to say, can explain it to me.
Right. I guess I can look at you while I'm talking to you. Right. So
We'll
it's
try.
hard to explain like the rush you get when A, you're about to possibly die. B, not to sound morbid, but you're about to possibly end someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
There is such a rush of emotions. We're still a moral being, whether you grew up in church or didn't grow up in church, regular nuclear family versus a split family. I mean, there's so much that in a fraction of a second rushes through your mind. You're like, oh my God, it's like overload, right?
I mean, like, how much of that, though, are you going from really being able to take stock of those emotions or just doing what you were trained to do?
Well, and
It's
that's a good
kind of one
question.
and the same, I think.
It is. Like, it's probably one of the few times I'll admit I had a split personality, okay? Like,
We know.
and my sister Val can stay out of this, but
My sister as well.
For me, it was that incident that you're referring to. I said I did not make one decision that morning. Okay, all of those thoughts and emotions running through my mind, I didn't consciously make a choice that day. It was strictly my training that kicked in and carried me through. And then at the end, when you're trying to process now your thoughts, you're like, holy crap, what the heck just happened? Right?
Yeah.
So it's just a rush of emotions that the first time you experience it, it is a rush. And that's where some of the confusion comes in, or like, is something wrong with me? Because I really like that. Especially for our
Right.
veterans.
Yeah.
Man, I really like the combat.
They really like
So
the
that's
battle.
where the addiction really comes in then. It's by
Absolutely.
by how-
It is such a rush through your entire body. I've never experimented with drugs. I've never had a desire to experiment with drugs. So the best knowledge I have is this: to feel it from the goosebumps on the back of your neck to even your fingers and your toes. You're just, I don't know how to describe it other than you are alive, right?
There's times that I've never felt more alive, in using that same context, was when, all of a sudden you hear the round ting off about 3 feet from your head.
Dirt kick up in front of you.
Yeah, and then you're diving to the ground and returning fire. It's like, now everything's real.
Right.
The colors are more colorful. They're more vibrant. You can see details before that, okay, this could be a potential, where before you're looking for a danger behind every rock. Well, now you know where the danger's at.
Have you tried acid? Because I've heard that does like the same thing.
Not lately. No,
Okay.
I never have.
I only ask because now the VA is experimenting with it.
Oh, yeah. Just like they experimented with other stuff in Vietnam.
I don't know what you're talking about. But trying to keep it humorous while we deal with these real emotions,
Yes.
because I do realize And I empathize with our veterans that are listening and some of our first responders that, I think sometimes we don't talk to our spouses because it is hard to explain. Like
Yeah.
if I looked at my wife and said, honey, I wish there was a guy pointing a gun at me. She'd be like, what the hell is wrong with you? Because it's that rush, right?
Then I'd get a phone call.
Right. But I know I'm connecting with somebody out there tonight that realizes here's two schmoes sitting on a couch. It's a couch. It's not a love seat. So be quiet.
We'll go with that.
We're just extremely large in a small couch. But I just know that we're connecting with someone tonight talking about these experiences, whether it was in the jungles of Vietnam, the deserts of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan. It doesn't matter. I know we're reaching someone.
Even our World War II vets.
Yeah. Hopefully there are some tuning in tonight. But it's something. There are so many adjectives you could use, but it's hard to describe any one of them.
We could use every adjective, the best one we could come up with, and it still would not describe the feeling in that moment.
Like it's almost. I don't. It's so weird to say, but it's almost erotic.
Yeah.
It's just weird. I don't know how to describe it. So yes, it is addicting to get those calls. And
now, would you say for first responder that'd be any call? Because potentially any call could be that call.
And I was thinking about that in preparation for this week, and there are some calls that I hate, man.
I'm getting text saying it's a love seat. Yeah, no, it's
not true. Who sent that?
You getting direct text because they're not going through the.
No, yeah, it's coming directly to me.
Whoever it is, they won't post it live though, will they?
Nope.
No. Chicken. But anyway, I was thinking about that in preparation this week of is there any calls that really I want to go to versus others?
And John, not to interrupt, but I am.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got two different perspectives as law enforcement and as firefighting.
Correct.
So, I mean, you've got a big difference of what constitutes an adrenaline.
Sure.
Call.
And primarily, I'm always going to speak from the law enforcement because that's my everyday job. If there's something significant from the firefighting side, I'll chime in on that separately.
Is it hard to separate the two in certain calls?
Kind of, sometimes.
I should have warned him I was going to ask him a tough question.
Right. Because, yeah. So with law enforcement, that's what I'm most comfortable talking about.
Got it.
So we're just going to roll with it. For law enforcement, there's your everyday calls. Somebody's picking on my kid at school. Well, hey, you can't tell them this, but, when I was a kid, you socked them in the mouth. And if they do it again, you sock them in the mouth one more time. Right? That's how we were raised. My mom always used to say, don't start a fight, but always defend yourself. Okay.
I always thought it was don't start a fight, but end it. But okay. Same thing.
And
kids, if you're listening, we're not endorsing fighting.
No, we're not. But, with that and, miscellaneous calls, car deer, trees nearly falling on somebody. It's like, well, what? You didn't see the tree? How'd you almost hit it? But
that sucker fell. Gravity was working great this morning.
You're telling me I fell off the deck today, but don't worry, I got that on body camera if I come up lame tomorrow. But anyway.
We'll need a copy of that footage.
Right, yeah. Well, it's from my point of view. Just you're going to have to bleep out some stuff. But I was very clear, like, oh, my back, oh, my hip, oh. Right. So there are calls, like, I think I've talked to you in private about dispatch preloading calls.
Yeah.
So there are times where the tone of a dispatcher or the deflection of a dispatcher, this call is like, this is legit. That's
going to be a rough one.
And those are the calls where instantly you're like, whoo, here it is. It's like the needle just went in your arm. You're like, there it is. And so those are the ones.
The more that they sound kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume the more that they sound kind of off, the more you're like, I got this one.
Right.
I'm taking this one.
Another instance that I had, my partner and I, this gentleman had a loaded crossbow, and he was threatening to harm himself and anyone that came. So
Field tip or broadhead?
I wasn't about to find out.
Oh, okay.
Either way, it was going to hurt, right? So I mean, at that point, it doesn't matter. But see, this is another topic for another day. But suicide's not illegal. You know that, right?
Right.
If you want to harm yourself, it's not illegal.
Right.
However, obviously, morally, for many of us, it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Morally, for many of us, we feel we must intervene. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the conundrum that law enforcement finds themselves in. Well, they haven't broken or violated any law, right?
Absolutely.
But obviously, someone cared enough to call.
Mm-hmm.
So you're there to do your best, but my man's armed. I'm not going to show up not armed, right? So, it's one of those things like guns are out,
Your job is to make sure those around him are safe.
Correct. Secure the scene.
Yep.
And
your job
ultimately-
isn't, people. It's a misconception. I've talked to people all over
You
the
have to
country.
do it.
I had to hit it. I talk with my arms. Just hit it again. I gotta stop that now. That they have said, when we show up to thing, people expect us as first responders to talk them down.
Right.
He's like, we're not there to talk them down. We're there to make sure they don't hurt anybody else in the process of making their own decision. Because he's had the same thing. It's not illegal to take your own life. We're not going to put you in jail for it.
Right.
But, and it's the same thing as, how do you differentiate between, taking care of them?
Mm-hmm.
So what would you do on that call? Or what did you do?
On that particular call, I being he was armed with a crossbow, obviously he's got some range.
Yeah.
This isn't a knife. This isn't, he's got some range that he can use. And of course, it's in a, not a place like yours. It's surrounded by woods. No, it's a wide open. It's a trailer park. So
So
everybody
he's
is
got
within
potential.
distance.
Yeah.
Right. And he's only got one shot. He better make it count. But, ultimately, we're there to help. Right? We don't want to see him end his life. We don't want to see him take anyone else's.
Mhm.
Right? And ultimately, we always know that in that type of situation, we may have to take his life in order to save someone else's, whether it's mine, my partner's, or a neighbor. So it is a very frustrating place or position to be put into. And as you know as well as I do, mental health is just, that's America's weakest link right now.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, many of our mental health patients end up in jail rather than in a facility to receive the help they need. And that's part of the goal, too, of this program is to kind of get rid of that stigma, and we can talk about some of these things.
Yeah.
But, we were able to get him to come out using the PA system, talking to, over the PA, advising him to come out, and he came out without the crossbow, but he was armed, and we were able to talk with him. I had a little bit of history with this gentleman, dealing with him in the past. We were able to resolve it peacefully. We were able to get him unarmed, take him into protective custody, and ultimately get him to a facility to get help.
Good.
But obviously, at any given moment, when someone makes that decision to end their life, that may involve you taking it. It may not be them ending it themselves. It may be them doing something for you to force it to end.
And they may have
Suicide by
planned
cop.
that too.
And they do. Unfortunately, the thing that really disheartens me is when you talk to these people that are suicidal, it's almost always really insignificant in the grand scheme of things what's wrong, but obviously it's huge in their minds.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme is, and that's what you got to kind of talk them back down to is really realizing, hey, do you have kids? How old are they? And I try and always skip the spouse, because that is
You
one
just
of
never
the
know.
leading,
Yeah.
one of the leading causes of maybe a divorce or something, and that brings
Unless
that,
the spouse is there at that moment,
Right.
it's probably good not to bring it up.
or even really parents for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
But always, because what parent's not proud of their kids, right? So I always try to bring the kids around into their thought and get them back to reality a little bit.
Right.
So I don't know where we got onto that tangent.
Well, that brings up one from my point of view. We were deployed, and you're checking levels there. Are we good?
Oh yeah, no, it was my level. I was just gonna turn up because we had somebody comment. And I was
Oh,
just going
go
to
for it. This is a good
go ahead.
break.
Well, I was just waiting until it got to a good point. We've got a comment from our top fan, Juliana. She says, even from a spouse's perspective, even getting a phone call of 2 trees falling in front being no big deal is actually pretty scary. It's when there's no call that's scary, is what she says.
Good
Yep.
point.
That would be my wife.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, I could tell when I called her, she was like, "Okay, are you okay?" I'm like, "Okay, I should have led with that." But for me, it was just like, "You should have seen this. This was awesome. It fell," and I completely skipped the point of, "Yeah, truck's good. I'm good."
Right.
But she's gotten those calls before.
Right. And that takes me, but thanks for really bringing that in, Jerrod, because, and Juliana, because this takes me back to that incident that we refer to of mine. There was a fight after, I took him down. We struggled a little bit. I took him into custody. And I was taking him for treatment to the hospital, and I felt I was fine. I didn't need treatment, but I knew in my mind that incident was large enough, and really in a small area like this, the police presence is enough. When they see 10, 15 cops around the house, they know something major just happened. And so immediately, I'm talking like as soon as the scene was safe and I got victim statement and securing evidence, I immediately texted my wife, and it's like, whatever you hear on the news, I'm okay.
Right.
Because, face it, social media changed the way we do business infinitely. When we try and do...
it's because of social media. You have body cams now.
Yeah, and I love them.
Yeah.
I absolutely love them. My court time has went down like 90%, seriously.
Oh, wow.
Because it's really hard to refute watching on camera what you said.
Yeah.
But, there are times where... like I said, I just gotta let her know. Hey, tell Pam that
Just
I'm
that
okay.
quick text.
Yep. Tell
And
Pam
there was
I'm okay.
times deployment they have what's called a blackout. Somebody gets hurt or killed from your unit, you're not allowed to talk.
Right.
But the order has to be given. And there's been times that you'd hear blackout coming, and a lot of us would jump on the computer real quick if we were in an area we could, and just be like, "Hey, we're good."
We're good. Yep.
And that was it. I remember talking to my wife on the phone, and all of a sudden incoming happened, and I'm like, I gotta go, click. And that was the last thing she heard, and she didn't know if it went dead because I got up or something bad happened. But what I was going to say earlier when we were talking about the suicide thing, a lot of times they don't even think about it themselves.
No.
It's just this is what's going to happen, and that happened in my unit. We had a soldier on the phone to his wife, and she basically, Jody.
Okay.
Yeah. She basically had found somebody and wanted him to come home and meet the significant other that she found while he was on deployment. And he said his piece and took his 9mm out, and they kept him alive for quite a few hours before he passed. But, that was probably one of the more shocking ones, because all of a sudden, there was no incoming. They were in a safe zone. They were inside of a hardened structure. It was just all of a sudden a round went off. And it's, the guys that were there said it took us a second because we're looking around like, what was that? And then we saw the guy fall, and they went after him. There was sure, guys always, hindsight's 20/20. Sure, they're like, oh yeah, well, we could have seen. No, nobody knew what that conversation was. That was his reaction. And it's just sometimes even having the rush of adrenaline isn't enough. And sometimes even having being in those situations is enough to keep things going. You're just done. And he was done because they'd been married for a while, and he just said, I'm done. That's it. And ended his life right there in front of everybody.
And I've said this, and maybe I'm opening up too much, I don't know. But I've said this before where I could never seriously contemplate suicide. I'm too much of a chicken, right? But I understand that there is a possibility that at some point in my life I would consider it, whether it be terminal illness. I've dealt with some of these cases where it's like, you know what? Maybe they didn't take the bad way out. You know, it's rough for the family. I get all of that.
Yeah.
But, as I'm speaking to you veterans, even our first responders, when it gets to a situation in our life that we feel we cannot control, because that's who we are, we're type A's, we're alphas, and the only thing that you think you can control is how you react to that situation. And what I often find is that suicide is the thing that they know they can control. They're going to control how they react, how they check out, however you want to call it. That's their control. And that literally scares the crap out of me. But, I just mentioned it to you before the show. There are points in my career where I've been okay with being comfortably numb.
Yeah.
I didn't want to harm myself. I didn't want to do anything stupid or crazy. I just, leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
I can go 12 hours in my car and not turn on the radio once. Last weekend I took my wife away
No
for a
road
weekend.
trip with you.
Well, and that kind of leads me up to this. I took my wife away for a weekend, and her sister was setting up a surprise birthday party for her. And for 2 days, we drove around northern Michigan, and my radio never once turned on. And there would be times where we don't say anything for hours.
Yeah.
But, it was Jerrod, go ahead.
I was just waiting. I'm waiting for you. I'm letting you do a thought. Now, do you think that has to do with the addiction that you get and the adrenaline that you get from that addiction? Just the fact that it's no longer there. While you're not.
It's
on
like
call.
white noise.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need that white noise in the background. I used to work at a clinic nearby that worked with autism, and sometimes you'd get one of the autistic kids that would go he would just go nuts because he was overstimulated, and even that white noise, and it kind of resets the brain.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with a guy in up north of here, and he used to have on YouTube, when he had a hard problem that he was trying to solve at work, he would have a box fan literally going from YouTube that somebody recorded and have it in his head. It's just that white noise that sets, okay, here's my baseline again. And sometimes when we know we're not going to get that call,
Right.
when we know nothing's going to happen, okay, we just want that white noise to just deaden things.
And maybe you can shed some professional light on this. There are times
Well,
where
let's not go that far.
well, we all, veterans and first responders, we often talk about anxiety and how it's linked linked with PTS. I call it but PTSD. And for Jerrod, that's post-traumatic stress injury versus disorder. I don't like to think that we have a disorder. We had order.
Yeah.
And I get that now it's in disarray or it's out of order. It's disorder. But it's an injury.
Well, hold on to your thought, because you just got something for me. But when they do the disorder part, and you said the injury, it's interesting. When you broke your arm, you don't have broken arm syndrome or broken arm disorder.
Right.
You just have a broken arm.
Right.
And it's an established way of how to fix it. Until recently, have I come to the kind of the conclusion through a lot of different circumstances and research that this disorder can become order.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way to heal it. Now, there's not a way to go back to who you were before it happened.
Right.
But there is a way to heal
To
it.
function.
But that's the same as a broken arm.
Yeah.
It's not
Correct.
back the way it was.
And I get it's just verbiage,
Yeah.
but
Oh, it's serious.
Verbiage
verbiage.
is very important.
when we
Yeah.
talk about stigma,
He's a producer. He said it's important. It's
it is.
important.
It's important.
You're
You heard it
right
here
there.
first.
The lines are important, and how we say things are important.
Absolutely. When we talk about breaking that stigma or ending that stigma, that's what it is.
Mhm.
Hey, nobody wants to sit back and say I have a disorder. That's like that's like probably saying you have schizophrenia. Nobody wants to admit that, right? But if you say, hey, you know what? I was in a time and a place where I got injured and I'm healing from it, it's a little easier to deal with. All right?
And it's all about the normalization of the effects of trauma, which is what this all boils down to. Yeah, the adrenaline after the call, or during the call, dealing with it after the call, the adrenaline that we felt in combat. Did I like getting shot at? No. No. Did I like the experience? Do I miss that experience? Yeah. I miss that. It's just like a normal junkie.
Right.
I missed that, having that experience again. I miss having that adrenaline going through me. We talked about a call that I happened to be on where a guy was hit by a car in front of me.
Right.
And, I pulled up after he had already been hit, but I was one of the first ones there, and I didn't realize it. But once I realized that there was an individual in the ditch 30 feet from where he was standing after getting hit by a car, I felt that adrenaline. It was there. It was instantaneous.
Sure.
I knew what to do. I had great medics in Iraq that helped train me. I've taken training since then, and I knew what to check for. I knew not to move them. All this stuff. I didn't have to sit there and think, okay, there's a guy there. His leg was not pointed, should not be pointing in that direction.
Right.
But it is. So, I'd have to think maybe he's got something wrong with his leg.
Right.
It was just instantaneously, and it was like everything focused in around me. And I was able to sit there and work with this guy and make sure he had no other injuries until first responders came on, which wasn't long. And then I was able to jump up and back onto the road and help the driver that hit him so her trauma wouldn't be as big.
Mm-hmm.
And, once I got done with that, I got to work. I was literally on an adrenaline high.
Oh, yeah.
I still was I was like, man, that was great. And I walked in and everybody else was like, oh, man, that's terrible. We saw that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it was that too. Yeah, it was terrible. Absolutely. It was terrible. But I had to remind myself that, yeah, that was a terrible experience, that for those that have been through stuff like this, well, that was just normal. That was just another day. Sweet. I got to use what I was trained to do.
Sure.
And, yeah, you get that high. Now, my question for first responders, when you get call after call, does that high just continue, or do you have the ups and downs?
You have the ups and downs. Hold that thought.
Got it.
Because you're going to be impressed, but I remember what I was talking about before. Anxiety.
Wow, and he didn't even use a cheat sheet.
I know, anxiety, right? We think about anxiety linked with PTSD or PTSI. Yep. And a lot of times people think it's about, right on the cusp of something like, oh, I'm going to a new school, anxiety, right? Or I'm going to, a lot of us don't like large crowds. I'm about to go to a concert, anxiety, right? All these things, but I find myself...
It's like COVID is my best friend. There is no large crowds anymore.
Right. And so I can't help but think I'm not the only one out there that I get anxiety when it's just quiet, when it's still. Like, I don't like it to be still. I can't handle the stillness, which sounds weird when I talk about how I don't turn on the radio for 12 hours.
But it's not still. You've got the tires. You've got natural sounds behind you.
Exactly. Yep.
And, yeah, when it's still, because, what's the saying, the calm before the storm?
Sure.
When we would roll into a village and we'd look and there'd be nobody on the road.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, we're dismounting now.
Right.
We are clearing this area. We're going to find out what's going on.
Sure.
And usually it met contact.
Yeah. It didn't take long to find it.
Yeah. Usually, they had spotters everywhere, and they would know we were coming before we knew we were there.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, it's quiet. And then that first explosion goes off, or that first round goes off, and then you get right into it.
Sure.
And that's why that calm, it's the calm before the storm.
It creates the anxiety and the uneasiness. And I think back to some of my friends that are more combat experienced than I, and it's just, they always talk about this restlessness, like they can't sit still, and that's that anxiety that I'm kind of referring to. But I just wanted to go back and touch on that because I felt it was important. to help explain some of the things. Like I said, I'm not the only one that goes through that.
I feel like we got a lot. We're spider webbing out. We got a lot of things that we can hit on this.
Right.
We could literally spend episodes on just this point alone, and we got like 7 more.
Okay.
Right. So we'll watch it, make some notes.
Right.
And we'll kick back to it.
Yeah.
Or if our listeners or watchers, viewers want to kick us some notes.
Bill Young says, "What's up, guys?"
Hey,
So,
my man
Bill.
from Nebraska. That's the
Oh.
author I told you about.
Oh, okay.
Was on a show a few weeks back. Thanks.
I
for
was
joining us.
honorably mentioned.
Right. So since I remembered my point, what was the point you wanted me to go back to?
I'm supposed to remember that now? Come on.
Where's Jerrod?
well, I guess that was supposed to be my job. Wasn't it?
Well, I guess
All
we
right,
don't
there
have
went
doubles
his
pay,
doubles
right?
pay. Yeah.
Right.
We try and
No,
keep
it was-
humor in this.
For first responders.
Oh, yeah,
and
the cycle.
Yep.
All right.
And since Bill's on here, even for those that are in, because I know he is, correct me if I'm wrong, he works in the prison.
Correct. Corrections
Officer.
And an esteemed author.
Very esteemed. I think his last book just came out. I can't remember the title of it.
Yes.
Is that The Lemonade Stand?
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
See, there's your mention, Bill. All, 3 people on here?
Or when home becomes a housing unit.
There are
Home
9,
becomes a
but
house.
I'm pretty sure I'm one of them.
And I know he's one because he's running here too.
Right.
So.
Well, I want to catch the comments as they come.
Oh, okay.
Um, but the cycle, and one of the
Because
things.
you get one call that you have where, it's not like your day ended after that situation you and I discussed where
No.
you had the
No,
tough
and-
situation.
No, in fact, that was for almost early on in the morning.
Yeah. So you still had, 12-hour shift, right?
Yep.
Yeah. You still had 12 hours.
So one of the things, like I said, I talk about the physiological changes of stress and traumatic incidents to the people that I do debriefings with and diffusings with. And one of the things that I try and get everyone to realize, and I'm going to try and look at the camera a little bit more, is when you're on this up cycle of adrenaline and endorphins and anger and all these emotions
Yep.
that you feel in a call, as high as you go, you must understand you have to equally come
what
as
goes
low,
up must come
right?
down.
It's just like a roller coaster. So I'm looking at Jerrod. He's looking a little lost.
Well, no. I was actually going to compare it to equal and opposite reaction.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly. So whatever the max reaction you had, you're going to have a reaction that's just as bad.
And coming down just like any other drug, when you come down and you come off of it.
Oh, yeah.
Being a substance use therapist for 3 years, I've seen people on that downward trend, and that's why they use so quickly so they can get back up. They don't like coming down, and it's not like, certain drugs you can stair step down from. No, you're right. You go up, you're in that fight, flight, or freeze, and your body has chosen to fight. You've been trained to fight. Do what you need to do. Everybody's good. And when you come down, it's like,
Right.
that's where a lot of veterans, and I'm sure first responders be the same thing, hit that depression.
Absolutely.
Even though for everybody else, hey, this is normal. This is where you're supposed to be.
Right.
But for us, it's we're depressed because we're down in normal.
And that's why, honestly, first responders struggle with mental health, whether or not they want to admit it, because that's something that has been shared with me as well. Is I believe what you're doing. I think it's great. You need to keep doing it, but I'm never going to admit I have a problem.
No.
Okay. Well, that's cool, but life can be so much better if you admit there's a problem and you get help for it. So, and the reason I say mental health is kind of prominent in first responders is we don't, when we finish a call, we don't get to stop.
Right.
We could be 11 hours left in our shift, right? So you're still at the peak, slowly coming down, and then maybe you do get another call and it goes back up even higher, right? So you take 3, 4, 5 traumatic calls in a day. Probably not going to happen, but it could, especially my medical personnel going from a, let's say a teenager suicide to a traumatic car accident where someone's, disfigured, dismembered, deceased, whatever. It's hard to maintain that level cycle, right? How do you maintain or get back to the level that your family knows and loves when you're going this?
Yeah.
When you don't get a chance to really maintain or get back to that whether it be because your sleep cycle is short before your turnaround shift, or my medical people that are working 24-hour shifts or a 36-hour shift. How do you do that? It's going to wear on you. So
you're going to get to that point where you yourself don't know where your normal is.
Exactly.
Everybody else knows you're here, but you
might be down here. That's normal for you because that's how you feel.
And you got to put this persona on, and that's why, and we're going to talk about this, we're going to dedicate a lot more time to this, or at least I'd like to. By the way, this is something we're going to dedicate time to.
Oh,
Thought
okay,
I'd let
cool.
you know.
Take notes, Jerrod.
Yeah.
I think we're going to dedicate a lot of time to this whole show, right?
Well, I hope so.
Right.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
talking just the subject matter of we have this persona at work, coworkers, and then we come home, and we don't feel like we need those barriers up so they see where we're really at. And, I mean, I know my wife and I have had this conversation many times of why are you this way at school or with other people? You know, I can lay down on the ground with a child that's autistic and work him through his overstimuli and get him back down to normal. But when I come home, my child spills milk.
Right.
And
Easily angered.
Yeah,
short
absolutely.
fuse.
You know, there has been plenty of times, unfortunately, I have tell my kids, hey, yeah, sorry about that.
Right.
You know, and it's embarrassing as a dad because, you know, you don't know why.
Right. And I think we do.
We
just don't
we
want
just
to
don't want
admit
to. Yeah, exactly.
Just like my buddy, I believe what you're doing. I think it's good, but I'm not going to admit I have a problem.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all of us. And really, that's how I got started 2 years ago was, you know what, telling my wife, like, hey, I got a problem. And she's been with me from the start, you know, and from really when my PTSD
Side note, he has
kicked in.
plenty of problems.
Well, I've only had 2 wives, so I can't sing. What's the 99 problems? But anyway.
Yeah. We'll get into that one later.
But Juliana made a comment for you, by the way. I'm not going to read it on the air, even though everybody else can see it.
No, I'm not even logged on to it.
But, you know, those are things that, like I said, I would like to talk about in the future and really open the doors to this honest conversation. You know, for the most part, we have friends out there, acquaintances out there, but I don't know many of you. I've only met Jerrod how many weeks ago? 2? 3?
Yeah, whenever we did that first recording.
Right. So, you know, I don't know Jerrod, and I use this line a lot when I work with the public. I don't know you. I have no reason to lie to you.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So when I have no reason to lie to you, the only thing left is the truth. And that's what I'm sharing with you today. I'm not sugarcoating anything. I'm not trying to hide behind anything. This is legitimately feelings that I have or have had or that I struggle with. And I think it's that open dialogue, you know, and to be honest with you, here's another honest moment for you. You know, there's times my wife gets upset because it's easier for me to come on here and talk about it than it is to talk about it with her.
Oh, I'm sure after this, my wife is going to say, you never told me about that.
Right. I'll get a text from the wife later because she's at work. Like, why'd you have to say that? But, you know, those are the honest things because we are disconnected. We're talking to a camera and we're talking to Jerrod and we're talking to each other.
Yeah.
We have similar circumstances, so we can share that. You know, and just
and
like
he's here so we can share them. So.
Right. You know, nobody's being judgmental. You
No.
know, everybody's encouraging, and that's the type of thing that we need to surround ourselves with, is people that understand or want to become better, and that's how you help end the stigma. We have an open, honest conversation. I have no reason to lie to you, and you have no reason to lie to me, and we have no reason to lie to our viewers or listeners. So it's just open, candid conversation that we can.
I mean, this
hopefully
is
bring healing.
Unfiltered. It's not like we sat down for 2 hours beforehand waiting for
No,
Jerrod to
and
finish up setting everything up.
And this right.
Well,
and that was kind of the thing of why we wanted to do it live tonight.
Yeah.
You know, even when we record it, really the only thing Jerrod can speak for himself, but he has the intro music, the closeout music, takes some of the noises, background noises out.
Yeah.
We to this point have never edited content. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
I fully believe in a candid conversation, and especially when we're dealing with what we're talking about, it needs to be as candid as possible.
Sure.
Now, here's something that just popped in my mind when we're talking about candid conversations. We doing good on time?
Yeah, we got about 10-ish minutes. Depends on which clock I'm looking at.
Look at the one that's but we've got veterans are out front when it comes to suicide. We got 22 a day.
Sure.
We do the 22 push-ups, and that's actually how you and I met, Jerrod. We do the got your 6 virtual runs. I know Warriors Hope did. We've got all these different programs. But you know what? One thing I realized when I was listening to it was actually Bill's podcast the other day was we don't have
shout out.
Yeah, hey, that's like what, 2 or 3?
Yeah.
I think he owes us at least one. It's a 1-for-3 trade. We're smaller.
Right. He needs to start talking about ours.
But no, I've never heard how the suicide affects the first responder population.
It's incredible. It really is. And I've shared this with some of my folks, especially when I'm talking to leadership of the Fire Chiefs Association and the medical field. That they're a little more reluctant to get on board with this. They would rather send us to a therapist. Well, that's great, but you don't have any idea of what I'm talking to you about.
And you also have got, what was it? I think you were the one telling me, or maybe it was another first responder said that their insurance didn't even cover going to a therapist.
Correct.
And if you went through a critical incident, you had, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, or 5 sessions, whatever?
Correct.
Yeah, you're not going to heal that in 5 sessions.
No. And so the suicide rate amongst first responders is actually like 30% higher than the normal population.
Mm-hmm.
Now you throw on something like substance abuse, now you've increased it even more, right? Because
those thoughts are there, but there's no filter to say, hey, this isn't a good idea.
I've heard that today.
From who?
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
So, yeah, the suicide rate doesn't go away. And in fact, I think I just shared it. We'll keep talking while I look for it. But I shared how many officers were shot and how many died of suicide this year. And
can I take a guess?
Sure.
Suicide was higher?
Well, and here's, I'm going to look for it before I answer that.
Okay.
Man, I'm going through the Surviving Danger Closest page, and there's like 17 things of Bill Young. Saturday Night Synopsis. 3 Guys by Fire. I'm sorry. Anyway,
Come on, Bill, help us out.
Yeah, Bill, I need some training.
Right.
We need you to train Jerrod.
And the thing is, so I went to a training with I believe it was, I've been to a lot of groups trying to network, and I believe it was COPS, COPS.
That is how you spell it.
Correct, but it's for
was there
families.
Theme song, Bad Boys?
No.
Oh,
but it was for families of survivors, family members of first responders that committed suicide. And this is why numbers are always skewed. Okay?
And that's what tells you a lot right there. They had to create their own group to get their...
Correct.
Yeah.
Because, number one, what does everything come down to? It comes down to $1, right?
Yeah.
Everything comes down to $1, which, again, thank you for Warriors Hope for helping sponsor this program. But everything comes down to $1. And what we were finding was, or they were finding, and they relayed to us, was that there are agencies out there that are, whether you want to say they're looking out for you or not, there were agencies out there that were not factually producing numbers of suicide because it meant that your family, your loved ones, lost their benefits.
Wow.
Okay, so they were fraudulently reporting a suicide as a gun accident. He was cleaning his firearm, accidental discharge, whatever.
And if you've got a cop or veteran or anybody that is, got enough time in.
Right. You
There's
know that
no
didn't
way.
happen.
Yeah.
So whether you want to say they were doing the family a solid or not, but when we're trying to produce numbers to get funding for our first responders and veterans to get help, it doesn't help the matter. The other thing that I really, really like about cops, and I hope I'm quoting the right group, is they focus on how the first responder lived their life, not how they ended it. Does that make sense? All right. We're officers, we're firemen, we're paramedics, we're EMTs. Whatever battle we face and we choose to end and lose that battle or end that battle, that's not who we are, right? There's countless lives that you have saved. There are countless children that you've, saved, marriages you've saved. There are innumerable good things that you do throughout a career, and that's not the focus, or should not be the focus that we focus on. Is how you ended it. Is not.
But
unfortunately for many,
that's
it
how
is.
it is. I mean,
so
the one
numbers,
guy that I mentioned earlier killed himself during a deployment. It took a long time for me to be okay with even mentioning his name.
Sure.
Just because of the veteran in me, he took the easy way out. It was like I mentioned before, the last episode where the reporter took off. He just couldn't handle it. And that's not the case.
Right.
The case is there was more going on than we knew about. And it kind of, for me, now being in the mental health field, it tells me not enough people showed him that he had support.
Correct. And that's, we all, I was watching a video yesterday. I believe the speaker's name was Rizzo, his nickname. And he was going off. He was presenting a presentation. He's talking about, don't give me this family. I'm going to cuss, but I'm quoting him. Don't give me this family bullshit. Mm-hmm. Don't stand up here looking pretty, saluting, crying because I'm gone when you didn't reach out and help me when I was here.
Yep.
And it's powerful because, man, like I said, to sit across from a fellow first responder one time and for him to tell me he was going to end it. Dude, that was the most earth-shattering, like...
That was your one.
I could not wrap my head around, man, we joke around, but, we're freaking heroes, man. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? There are kids, because none of us know who we influence, right?
Right.
And so, like, we got school fire safety day coming up with my agency where we're going to go into the schools dressed in our firefighter turnout gear and present ourselves so that kids, if they see us, hopefully never in a house fire, they won't be as scared of. Mm-hmm. They'll realize we're helping, not.
So you're almost like you're doing exposure,
yes,
pre-trauma.
Yes. So if you can get there and do those things, man, you can reach so many more than if you just ignored it and hoped the problem went away.
And that's the thing. If you ignored, like, say the guy that I responded to just because I happened to be in the right place when he got hit by the car, if he would ignore, nope, my leg's fine. It's just, dangling there, but it's fine. If he just ignored that, people would be wondering what's wrong with his head.
Right. Absolutely.
But yet when first responders or veterans don't ignore their own symptoms, it's like, oh, that's all in your head. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard that from
right.
all in
it's
your
in
head.
your head. There's nothing wrong with you.
He's giving us the dryer motion. I think we're
wrap
close.
It up. So,
and like we said last time, that's what Surviving Danger Close is about. Yes, we're going to talk about things that we've never told anybody before right here, because to us, mentally right now, it's just Jerrod, you
just
and me.
Three of us.
And good thumbs up, Jerrod.
Right.
And, so for us, we're going to share stuff that we normally would not share. I'm sure my wife is going to learn a lot about my experiences in deployment.
And we know she's watching because she's been commenting.
I'm sure she has.
Right. And besides, there's a therapist and we're on a couch. So we kind of feel obligated to share.
Right. And our hour's almost up. So
Yep.
either we have to put either charge more or we'll have to wrap it up.
I think we're at a good spot.
Yeah, I think we are. Next week, we are going to see how Alexander Hamilton, or I'm sorry, not next week, 2 weeks. Jared's freaking out there.
Bi-weekly podcast.
Bi-weekly, yes. We're going to figure out how Alexander Hamilton fits into all this. So there's a good kind of kicker for...
So
Perfect.
So this time, Dustin and I will be outnumbering John in terms of knowing Alexander Hamilton, at least from the musical.
Have you not seen it?
I refuse.
You refuse. We'll talk about that off air. Yeah, he is crazy.
But again, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yep.
It's SDC. It's been fun. It's been real. Again, big shout out to Warriors Hope for helping sponsor this program. Anyone else you'd like to thank?
Nope, that pretty much covers it.
All right, guys. We'll be in touch. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.